The first half hour, we talked about the big news story of last week with the Nova Scotia forest fires, which left a orange haze all over the northeastern parts of the Midwest. In this half hour, we're going to talk about the other big news story, which is the former failed President Trump's indictment under the Espionage Act, all 38 counts, or 37, or whatever it is. Before we get to our guest, Sarah Jones from PoliticusUSA, we're going to play this very disturbing clip, and it's so disturbing, I wonder if it's even a real good idea to play it, from Kari Lake, the former failed Republican gubernatorial candidate from Arizona, who seems to be threatening the president and the attorney general and the special prosecutor with violence. I'll let you make your own decision.
I have a message tonight for Merrick Garland and Jack Smith and Joe Biden. And the guys back there in the fake news media, you should listen up as well. This one's for you. If you want to get to President Trump, you're going to have to go through me, and you're going to have to go through 75 million Americans just like me. And I'm going to tell you, most of us are card-carrying members of the NRA. That's not a threat. That's a public service announcement.
That was pretty funny, wasn't it? You know, our guest in this half hour is Sarah Jones, who is the editor-in-chief of PoliticusUSA. We're going to talk about the Trump indictments in this half hour. But before I ask Sarah a question, that clip is really horrifying. It's a subtle way of, threatening violence against the President of the United States. Maybe it's not so subtle. The Attorney General, Merrick Garland, and the Special Prosecutor, Jack Smith. When I first heard of Trump's indictment last week, I, like many millions of Americans, were glad it finally happened. Somebody's finally trying to hold Donald Trump accountable. But the more I thought about it, the more depressed I was. For one thing, I kept asking myself, how did a guy like Donald Trump, who so blatantly ignores the law and the Constitution, get elected President of the United States in the first place? There must be something fundamentally wrong when a guy like that can become president. Then, after that, my next wave of depression came when I started hearing and seeing people like Kari Lake threaten violence to the Biden administration for bringing Donald Trump finally to account. And the other thing that upset me was the baseless defense by Republicans of Trump's actions. It seems to me anybody with half a brain can see that he violated the law and the Constitution. But basically, the Republican defense was very depressing, I thought. Well, he was president. He can do anything he wants. And Jack Smith said the special prosecutor said in his press conference that no one, not even a former United States president, is above the law. Apparently, many Republicans think Donald Trump is against the law. He himself said, well, you can't indict me. I'm running for president. Political interference. Well, he's just like anybody else who violates the law. But anyway, sorry, let's bring on Sarah while I calm down. Sarah, what was your reaction to the news of the Trump indictment?
Well, first of all, it was a long time coming. So there was a sense of, finally someone is holding him accountable for something that he's done against this country, allegedly. Because, what happened in New York is not about what he's done to this country. Now, what has come out since that indictment was unsealed, we have heard experts, including from his own former Department of Homeland Security, counterterrorism expert, said that throughout the 4 years of his presidency, he was jeopardizing national security, and that this is more of the same, and that this costs people their lives. And so to come to hear that, and of course, the very first time that I went on international television after Trump was elected, I talked about him being a national security threat. That has always been the story of Donald Trump's presidency. There were a lot of horrible things that he did and a lot of distractions. But ultimately, when it came down to it, it wasn't even a partisan thing. It was that he was putting our country at risk. And he continues to do that. We don't even know yet from this unsealed indictment that we have all of the documents back from him. And we don't know who's all seen them. We know that foreign dignitaries and people related to them traipsed through Mar-a-Lago, and that this stuff was out there in the open for anyone. One of the rooms even looks like it has a copy machine in it. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And to hear Republicans defend this.
Yeah, I mean, there's one story about him showing Kid Rock secret maps of North Korea. Kid Rock, the well-known national security expert.
Right. Right.
And he's showing other people invasion plans of Iran. And,
right.
why don't we just show Hitler the invasion plans on D-Day and the beaches of Normandy? I mean, Jesus.
This is going to impact us for at least like the next 10 to 20 years. A lot of our secrets are out there. Our allies don't trust us anymore. And I think to hear people undermining this and dismissing it and excusing it is absolutely reprehensible. And I'm going to go so far as to say that a lot of these people who are elected took an oath of office to protect this country from all threats, foreign or domestic. And I am getting the idea that they're not doing that.
And, again, as the other thing that really bothers me, and again, I go back to a horrible clip from Kerry Lake, is the threats of violence. Right. It just seems to me that the American political system is just breaking down. And basically, Donald Trump, if he's going to go down, he's determined to take the country down with him, which is nobly patriotic, of course.
Right. Well, hasn't he always been? I mean, I don't think I've actually was thinking a lot about this in the first or maybe the second couple pieces I wrote about this indictment. I was thinking about, has he ever put this country over himself? I don't actually remember that ever happening. And repeatedly, his story has been that he comes first, enriching himself comes first. And, this country, I don't even know if it's on his list of priorities. I mean, we have not seen any evidence that it is. And for someone who was in office for 4 years, that should have come up at some point. But let's not forget, he gave the Russians, he brought them into the Oval Office and gave them our secrets during his presidency. This is what a lot of the very few Republicans that are coming forward now, like his own, hand-picked Attorney General, Bill Barr, doing his own reputation management circuit now. Oh, this indictment's really bad. Well, Mr. Barr was one of many people justifying Donald Trump's assault on this country, on our national security, and his own, he did those things after knowing that Trump had the Russians into the Oval Office. So, and knowing the Russians interfered, he knew more than probably anyone except for, Robert Mueller, how much the Russians interfered and how open the Trump campaign was to that. So why this country's been gaslit that we can't even talk about these things that are real. If that's been going on for so long, and until we don't get a handle on that, I don't see how the democracy survives. We have to get on the same page with the majority of people and agree on the facts. These things happened.
It's amazing. We're going to go to break in a minute, but I'm reading a book about the political situation in the United States just prior to the Civil War. And I'm reading this and thinking, God, is this happening again? the threats of violence, the polarization. This is really a mess. We've got to go to break now, very short break, but to let our radio listeners off for a few minutes. But our guest is Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. And we are going to continue this conversation after a very short break for our video viewers on Facebook and Twitter. So we will talk more about the political and legal implications of the Trump indictment and the dangers that's causing the nation right after this very short break. Line DC with Brad Bannon. My guest in this half hour is one of my favorite guests, Sarah Jones, editor-in-chief of Politicus USA. We have been discussing the political and legal impact of the Trump indictments. So let me ask you this question, Sarah. Yesterday, ABC, I think it was ABC News, released a national survey on the Trump indictments, and I'd like to ask you what you think of this. In the survey, 48% of Americans thought that Trump should have been charged. 35% said he shouldn't have been charged, and the other 17% said they didn't have an opinion. The way I saw that is, well, the good news, there are more people who think he should have been charged in what seems to me a very blatant case in violation of the Espionage Act. So that's good news. There are more people who think he should be charged than didn't think charged, but there are only 48%, wasn't even a majority of Americans who think he should be charged. And if you look at the demographic breakdowns, just about all the Democrats thought he should be charged. Just all the Republicans thought it shouldn't be charged. And there are some people, mostly independents, in the middle. What's your reaction to this 48-35% split, Sarah?
Well, first of all, the media was reporting that it's the same. It's not the same. 48, as you pointed out, is a lot bigger than 35, and that does matter. I think that people are not getting accurate information about what's at stake. And I think that is actually a risk that the government has on their plate right now, facing them in this case. How to make this case simple so that everyone understands it, including jurors, not to get bogged down into, the rules about Presidential Records Act and all of this. There's so many legal issues going on here and weaving in and out. But the bottom line is Trump took classified documents. He took Defense information, documents pertaining to our national defense. He stole them from the United States. He kept them at Mar-a-Lago. When asked about this, he lied multiple times, one time in response to a subpoena. Meanwhile, he was sometimes showing this stuff and leaving it very carelessly, sometimes spilled out of boxes, so that anyone who traipsed through Mar-a-Lago could see it.
Including Kid Rock.
Exactly. So that's the case that is very simple to make. And I think that when the American public, if they ever hear that, because I don't have a lot of faith in our media. There's a lot of both sides activity going on here. Well, they say it's politicized. You know what? I've got a newsflash for everyone. The politicization of this case is that it took this long to bring it forward. This should have happened a long time ago. And it would have happened if he was anybody else, including a Democrat. So the real problems we have in this country is that we're not dealing with facts. And I think the media is partly to blame for that. So that's why you're seeing that people don't understand what's at stake here. If somebody said to them, his own Department of Defense Assistant Secretary to the Counterterrorism Department said on TV, this causes people to die, people in the military and our assets, our intelligence assets. And then we saw so many, a big rise in deaths of our intelligence assets in the last couple of years. Now, nobody's saying that came from Donald Trump having these documents, but it happened. And, we know now that we don't know with whom he has shared all these documents.
Okay, we need to come back and take a very short break to bring back our radio listeners, and we'll have more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. In this half hour, we're discussing the legal and political implications of Donald Trump's indictments, or latest indictments, I should say. Our guest is Sarah Jones, who's editor-in-chief of PoliticusUSA. Okay, Sarah, let's try this. The last national poll I saw of Republican primary voters, which came out last week, I think it was conducted before the indictment, this set of indictments anyway, showed with Trump with 61% of the Republican vote, and I think Florida Governor Ron DeSantis had 28. Now, before the Jean Carroll case was decided, before Trump was indicted for felony fraud in New York City and Manhattan by a grand jury in Manhattan, he was leading DeSantis in the national polls by 25 or 20 points. But his lead has been widening. And my question to you is, do you think once the news of these recent set of indictments registers, do you think Donald Trump's lead over Ron DeSantis will go up or go down?
Well, I want to say that I think what's happening, because one of the excuses that the media seems to use, we shouldn't, prosecute Donald Trump because then, he's going to get more support. We have to remember this is all happening in the bubble of the Republican Party. And within that party, he's always been leading, as you pointed out. I don't think that I don't think this helps him in a general election against, Joe Biden. Does it help him against these other Republicans? Yes. I mean, these people, the Trump base, which is the majority of the Republican Party, are being reanimated by just hearing his voice. I wrote about this today on Politicus USA, A View from Trump Country, because I live in Trump country. These people, they've had a little Trump fatigue. They've taken down a lot of their signs. There's been less support for him visually and on the ground, just in conversation. That doesn't mean they're not going to support him. So as soon as they start hearing him, and it's like his voice is like a cult leader, it serves as Kool-Aid. As soon as they hear it and they hear him blaming Democrats and Joe Biden and everybody's out to get me, as tired as they are of his drama, which they are, they also are brought right back to, being animated and going full-fledged support for him. I don't think DeSantis has, and I never thought he was going to have Trump voters. He's got the wealthier people in the party who want a better face on this kind of neo-fascism that they're pushing. So, that's what DeSantis is, right? He's
a friendly fascist.
He's a friendly looking, but he's not, yeah, exactly. I mean, he's a good look for fascism. Or at least it seems like that on the surface. I'm not even sure that that's actually true, because when you see him on video and you see him interviewed, he's very robotic. And I think that's why he chose to announce next to Elon Musk, who himself is robotic. He was like, maybe the comparison's going to help me. So.
Okay. Well, how about this? I was watching some legal expert on one of the networks talk about how this new set of indictments will play out. And he suggested that there might not even be a trial on these new indictments until after the election next year. So the question is, what impact do you think this is going to have on the 2024 presidential campaign? And let's assume that Trump is going to be nominated by the Republicans. There's a decent enough chance that he will be. He'll be running against Joe Biden. And as soon as the presidential election is over, or more likely in January of 2025, he could be a president on trial or it won't matter anymore because he'll be lose to Joe Biden again, and he'll be a private citizen on trial. How do you think this is going to play out over the course of the 2024 presidential election?
Well, a lot of that is really so, depends on Judge Cannon, right? We already know she's not only incompetent, but biased for Trump. Does she recuse herself? Does she allow his usual tactics of delay, which is going to hurt the country if they do let that happen? How is it going to play out if it's postponed? Which let's just say she's staying there and it gets postponed. Then I don't think that he's ever going to be brought to justice on these charges. In a way, I mean, it doesn't look like that would happen. If he won the election, certainly not. And if he doesn't win the election, I think we're going to be pretty busy dealing with some other issues brought on by him. But, either way, the rule of law says that he should be treated like everyone else. And Judge Cannon says that he should be treated specially because he is a former president. And so that makes her right away, she should follow the rule that she needs to recuse because it looks to the public like she's not impartial. And as far as how it will play out for the Republican base, there's not going to be any problem for them. They would vote for, he's already twice impeached. He's already found liable for sexual assault. They don't care if he's a criminal. They don't care that he's hurt the United States. They don't care that he hurt the military. They don't care. Now, is it because they don't hear about it? I think that's a big part of it because the right-wing media never tells them this stuff. And I know that from talking to people every day. And when I bring up to them, like, hey, you used to be in the military. Don't you think that it's not cool to share, our plans for, and then people be like, oh, yeah, that's not okay. But it's not fair because Joe Biden, and they're just conditioned to then turn around and go back to Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden because that's what they're told all day long. It's whataboutism, it's deflect, it's deny. So they're going to be out there voting for Donald Trump until he is no longer with us. I'm afraid.
That's a discouraging thought,
Yeah.
but you're probably right about that. Okay, well, let me ask you this, Sarah. Before the indictments were announced on Friday or whenever they were announced last week, I saw a new national poll. And the head-to-heads showed that Trump and Biden were in a tight race and a tough race. The other thing that startled me is if you looked at the unfavorable, the number of voters who had a favorable opinion of both candidates, 31% had a favorable opinion of Joe Biden, and 31% had a favorable opinion of Donald Trump. How can that happen?
Well, it's just so sad what's going on in our country because obviously these two presidents are very different people.
You would think so.
Yeah, it's obvious on it. Here, no matter what anybody thinks about Joe Biden, he's competent. He shows up every day. He's doing the work for the people, and he is doing work for red states the same as he is for blue states, which is the job of the president that Donald Trump did not do. He also took care of, the pandemic. I know it's not over, and I have issues with that, but, he did his job is the point. So how is that, how are the two being equated? You might say that it's the polarization of the country but I think the real problem, is that Democrats are kind of, they're always so critical of their own, right? Which is a good thing, hold people accountable. But then when you see polls like this, you're going to see that reflected. That's not happening on the right. They don't criticize their own, and there's constant cheerleading. So that's part of the poll. And the other part of it is that Joe Biden is in office right now, and he's going to be held accountable for things that aren't even in his control, some of which isn't in his control. So, rising inflation, the cost of homes, all of the supply chain, all of these things that he doesn't have direct control over, people might be responding based on those things. Whereas Donald Trump, it's all nostalgia for his base. Things were so great, as we know it was absolutely horrific. But, I think that's reflected.
Okay. Sarah, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure having you on Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I want to thank both our guests today, Sarah Jones, Editor-in-Chief of Politicus USA, and Bob Deans, Director of Strategic Engagement at the Natural Resources Defense Council. Stand strong and be strong in these troubled and turbulent times. We'll be back with more of Deadline